And welcome back. So, as you know, we're talking about internship prep for psychology. And so today we're going to talk about Essay 4 and your cover letters. Um, it's interesting. I was talking about Essay 4 with Danielle, my wife, and I, when I wrote my notes for this, I said this should be a cakewalk. This is by far the easiest of the four essays. And she reminded me that that may be the case for me, but not necessarily for everyone. So, essay four is where you talk about your research. And so, this is the essay that you've been dying for if you're an academically minded person where research is your jam. But if research is not your jam, um, this one might be a little harder, and that's okay. Um, as much as you can, without going into too much personal detail, you want to talk about your story, about how you end up researching what you do, and how that, especially if you're academic and you're planning on going in that way. What's your research program? How did you get to where you're at? How did studies come together? Where do you want to be? What experiences do you want research wise? So, for many sites, those that are more clinically oriented, this is not going to matter all that much. Um, they're just gonna. It's good for them to see a sense of what it is that you do and what you're interested in, but that's about all they're gonna care. For the sites that are more built around training researchers, your Brown, Western Psych, those sorts of places, your clinical science type internships, this is going to end up being very, very important. They're going to want to see that you have a strong background in research. They'll want to see what you've done. And again, my challenge to you is try to give them something other than what you have on your CV. So they can get the sense of the number of pubs. They can get a sense for where you've published, all that from your CV. Maybe you highlight one or two if you have a couple of really good ones in really good journals. Um, what your CV doesn't say is where it is that you want to go, what you want to do when you grow up, what training you need in order to get to that next level. I think that's where this essay can help fill the gap for those more research oriented students. You can really illustrate, you know, I've had this experience, but I've never had experience with clinical trials. I really want to do clinical trials. So the next step is really getting that experience either on internship or postdoc or both, so that I'm able and really prepared to do that type of research, that sort of thing. Um, so for some of you, this will be an easy essay. For others, it'll be hard. But regardless, it's usually the one that requires the least amount of edits because by now in grad school, you're used to talking about your research, and you wouldn't be here unless you could tell that story, even if it's not something you want to do the rest of your life. It just kind of well, you wrote applications for grad school. It's kind of similar to that as SA4. Now the cover letters. Cover letters are easily written off until you realize just how much work goes into them. Um, I venture to say the majority of the time you spend writing for internship prep is going to be on your cover letters. And the reason why is that you can't just have a general cover letter. A cover letter has to be customized for each and every site. Now you can have kind of a skeleton cover letter that, where a lot of the bones are there. You know, you have a template essentially. But still, each site's going to have their own. Now, first, some sites are going to want specific things like rotation preferences. So be sure to check the website, see if there's certain things they say they want in their cover letter. It's an easy way for them to screen applicants out if you don't have it. So just make sure that it has whatever that site wants. Beyond that, you're going to want to show that you know the site. So you're going to want to mention, certain tracks and ideally even certain supervisors that you'd like to work with. Even though we know this, I can tell you we all have egos. And, on the grad school level, I love seeing a letter that says I really want to work with Dr. Nadorff. I can't help but like that. So, if I'm reviewing these, if someone, not only mentions the rotation, but if you're able to easily tell from the website who the rotation supervisor is, mention, I'd love to work with Dr. Smith on this, or especially if Dr. Smith is really well known on this. Mention, Dr. Smith is an expert on, such and such. And, it'd be great to train under someone like that, or with the resources that you have at, school X or, hospital Y. Um, it's also, I think, important to show that you're not a final product. You want to be clear that you have the experience necessary for internship, but that you also need additional training and you have training gaps. And specifically, you want to show that you have training gaps that fit well with that site. So if your training gap is that you really need inpatient training and it's a site that doesn't have an inpatient unit, that's not going to bode well for you. You're not a good match for that site. But if it's a site where they have a certain specialty, for instance, like for my internship, I went on a track that was a geropsychology track. So if you can show certain gaps with geropsychology training, for instance, where I had some, but I didn't have enough. And I didn't have, they specialize on anxiety. I had a lot of depression background and sleep, not as much anxiety. I was able to highlight, while I have this experience that makes it so I'm qualified to get through the door, there's something I can learn here. I'm not a final product. So that's really kind of what you're shooting for. Now, there will be some sites, and I've talked about this before, that want you to be a final product. Those are also often the ones that view you as cheap labor. And you're not going to want to be at one of those sites anyway. You want a site that understands that they are, it's a focus on training. They're there to train you. And hopefully a site where they end up recruiting a lot of their faculty from the internship. That's great. That means they have an incentive to train good people because they're going to end up being on their faculty. So again, something to look for. But I think it's good to show that there's training gaps. Um, if you come across as knowing everything and being an expert on everything, honestly, it's going to come across as naive. Um, One of the things that I thought was really interesting that was pointed out to me a while back is if some telltale signs that someone's junior in the field are usually overconfidence, but also being pickier and harsher than others. So, where this came in, long story very short, I was doing a journal review and I knew the editor. And I asked the editor, do you have any feedback on the reviews I'm doing? And he said, you look very junior. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, you picked, even little things you were picky on. And that's fine. It's not that that was incorrect, but junior people feel the need to show that they know things, and they're more picky than a senior person who's going to focus on the bigger things, focus on the things that really matter. And so there's this transition of, with as you become more senior, typically we become a little less picky, but we also know what things to pick on. We pick on the things that really matter, or at least hopefully we do. So likewise, if you come across and you seem overly confident, or if you go on one of these internships and you come across as being very picky and very, like even minute details, you might end up coming across as being junior and not as prepared as you're trying to portray. So just keep that in mind, for what it's worth. But it's something that's pointed out to me that I thought was really helpful. For all your essays, but especially for your cover letter, be sure on the bottom, put your APPIC number, put your phone number, have that easy to get. You want a site to be able to reach you very, very easily. Email address, put it there, because a lot of sites will do emails for invites for interviews. So make it super easy for them to get in touch with you so that they don't have to hunt that down.